Like a good magazine, we like to make sure that the story flows and everything fits perfectly like a wonderful puzzle. In my world at the moment, it's mainly Paw Patrol and Peppa Pig puzzles. But we are, the next session, you've learnt about fears and how you embrace fears. Well, it's coincidental that this next session, and I'm hoping those of you who didn't ask questions have thought about adversity and how you faced it and what you've done with it in your working environment and how you've turned that into success. Because next up, we've got a fantastic panel, 3 advertisers talking about 3 times that they faced, or 1 time they faced adversity, how they've overcome it and how they've achieved success on the back of it, either in a personal or a work capacity. And we talked about being brave and being bold and having attitude. And I'd say all 3 of these are being pretty brave, pretty bold, and we'll have some attitude, particularly the moderator. So without further ado, let me welcome the moderator to the stage. It is Gemma Greaves, the CEO of the Marketing Society.
Hello, everybody. I'm not actually sure how we can follow that. That was incredible, wasn't it? I just want to hang out with Michelle now. I think our industry could learn so much from her. So for those of you who don't know who the Marketing Society is, everything we do, our purpose is to inspire bolder marketing leadership, and we do that globally through our community of members and events. And since I joined in my new role 3 months ago, I was promoted to Chief Executive, which in itself, just saying the words Chief Executive just feels quite scary. And I'm very grown up, and I'm not the most grown up people, those in the room that know me. So when I moved into those shoes, and very big shoes from the person that used to do the role, I thought, could do things the same, or we could embrace a little bit of fear. We could look at how we can be a bit braver and how through bravery we can really learn from each other. So that's what we did. So we turned it all on its head. And so everything we've been doing this year is through a brave lens. And it's about, instead of talking about our successes, which as an industry, as marketing leaders, we have many, actually let's start sharing our failures. And just from hearing from Michelle, it seems to be a really good thing to do. So to do that, you need brave people, and I've got 3 really brave people that are joining me today. So I'd like to welcome our brilliant panel. So first up, we've got Paul Graham, who is, and he's got a very long title, so I'm going to read it, Vice President of Operations, Creative, Media and Marketing. Paul, would you like to come up to the stage? Secondly, we've got Nick Graham, who is the Global Director of Digital Marketing and Media at Huawei. And just pronouncing that is brave, because apparently I could be sacked for not pronouncing that properly. And Sarah Mansfield, who is the Vice President of Media, Europe, LATAM and Global Operations at Unilever. My goodness, what a panel. Thank you. Thank you. So, how are we all feeling following that last speech? Yeah, a bit scared. So what we thought we'd do, and we're really going to encourage questions, so really think about what you'd like to ask our formidable panel. And if you want to share anything yourself as well, we're really up for that, and Jeremy can help with that once we've got going. But what we thought we'd do is start with a time where we faced adversity. So we've asked each of the speakers to share a story. So I'm going to start with Paul first.
I'm straight in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so hello everyone. I am going to tell you about the time where I think I pretty much the first time ever in my career faced about as much failure as I could stomach in that one go, which was I started at Saatchi's, which if everyone knows the agency even back then, back in the 1980-somethings, was pretty hardcore, was a place where you really learned your craft, and if you didn't, then you weren't deemed a good enough stormtrooper. And about 3 years into my time there, everyone around me sort of, in a flurry of sort of domino sort of resignations in this specific group that I worked in, my group account director, the group planning director and the account director on a particular bit of business all resigned to do sort of lifestyle choice sort of things, which meant that the sort of space above me felt very, very clear, and the next person above me, theoretically, for a couple of months, was the chief exec. And I thought, wow, this is amazing, this is my time to shine. And so I took the whole account with both hands, and I quietly didn't tell anyone that clearly there was no one else around to help me, and figured that this was the best thing that could possibly happen to me. I handled all the meetings with the client, I presented all the work, I presented the briefs, I handled the budgets, and I thought, oh, this was my time to do it differently, to not be so quite so uptight as everyone else at Saatchi's was, and to handle all the meetings in the cafe, and to like introduce them to the creatives, and just hang out and just be cooler than everyone else in the building. Which I thought was really working very, very well, until a day then I was doing exactly that, and the client hadn't shown up, and I wasn't really quite sure, and I couldn't get hold of him. And then there was a phone call, which back in the days then, Saatchi's didn't even like voicemail. They didn't like the idea that you could not handle a problem or a phone call from anywhere, not in the moment. So how it worked was, if your phone rang, you had 5 rings before every other phone on the area around you rang as well. That had another 2 rings, and then the entire group's phones rang. And then after 2 more of those rings, if no one else was ringing, the entire floor would ring. So pretty quickly, phones were answered at that time. I was not at my desk. I was sort of scurrying around, sort of doing everything probably last minute. And someone from the other side of the floor called across me as there's like cacophony of phones were going, and said, "Paul, the chief exec is calling your name and wants you to go downstairs to his office now." Now, when you're 3 years into a career at Saatchi's, the chief exec doesn't really hang out with you that much. So this was probably the first moment at which the fear properly set in. Well, no, it was like, oh, this is great, the chief exec knows me by name. Or, shit, the chief exec knows my name. So downstairs I went, and sure enough, he had read a letter, which he was going to read for the second time ever with me in the room, which had 21 points of complaint from the client that I thought I had the chance to improve my time at. And he announced this to me, and then he said he was going to sit there and he was going to read them out to me, and we were going to decide whether we thought that they were right, whether they were wrong, if they were right, what we were going to do about them, if they were wrong, how we were going to challenge the client about them, and what we were going to do to solve every single one. And I was not allowed to leave the room until we'd gone through the entire letter. Now, I don't know if anyone else has ever had that happen to them, but let me tell you, when you're 3 years into your career and the first time you've had a conversation with your chief executive is that letter, you're pretty effing terrified. But thankfully, and this has served me really well in my entire career since, my reaction was to stare him right back and to, without any, well, though there was a lot of, like, in fact, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now. There were a lot of chills going on in the background, but I just realised what the game was, which was, no, I have to face these. My entire time at this company is going to be defined by the moment now. So whatever I wanted to do, I stared back and I nodded and I said, yep, okay, let's take these. And he read them out, and then the first one he read out, which was around sort of lack of senior attention from the company. As he said it, he said, I'm going to take this one. This is totally on me. I should have realised that you were floundering, and it's not fair that you let. So he sort of ticked it, and he said what he was going to do. And I got the game. So for the next 3, before we'd even finished, I didn't even know what they were going to be. I sort of went, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I realised that by taking the responsibility for some of these major, major things, he started looking at me and nodding. And he sort of noted things down. He got all the way to the end. I don't even know how we got to the end. I was very, very glad when we did. And he said, okay, so he goes, look, there's one final question I've got for you. And he said, given all these things we're going to do, and I'm going to call him up, and I'm going to restructure the team, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, he said, I'm going to give him a completely new account team. He said, it's going to be this person, this person, this person, this person. He goes, and there's going to be the senior account manager is going to be vacant. He said, so he goes, I've got one final question for you. He said, given how bad this is, and given how the client probably never wants to see you again, and we're going to sort everything out, he said, I can either give him a completely new senior account manager, and you never have to worry about that and never look back. He said, or you can stay on the account. Which would you rather do? And I looked him back in those eyes again, thinking, if this game means anything, this is the right thing to say. Shit. I want to stay on the account. And he looked me back, and he literally almost dropped his pen. And he looked at me and went, that was the right answer. And the client actually turned out to have embezzled a load of money and is now in prison. And I have to say, every single major sort of like agency, sort of initiative or big project where the chief exec needed a particular like trusted pair of hands. From that point on, I just stopped. From that point on, he always called my name, and the phone always rang on our floor with the chief exec asking for me to help him on a particular thing. So genuinely facing that fear and that failure rocketed my career from that point on.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got lots of questions, but I'm going to wait until Nick's story. So over to you, Nick.
Okay, sure. Yeah, this is a bit like airing one's dirty laundry. My early years were in agencies, my formative years. The story I would like to tell is, I'd started in my first big agency role and was asked to implement things like paid search, paid for social, analytics. Not terribly exciting stuff at the time. Well, not looking back, it was quite exciting. In it was quite data-driven. It was performance marketing, as it later became known. But it was a bunch of work that was, I think, at the time required a degree of, and I take note from Michelle's talk earlier, a degree of fearlessness. I think a lot of people stepped back from it to kind of watch the car crash. Car crash TV, as we say in the UK. But things went through really, really well. And in a 24-month period, we accelerated growth. We onboarded a number of huge clients, all reasonably successfully. Things went swimmingly, and we had a model. We had a model for doing this. So we onboarded, huge international brands with success. I went on to move to a different role, and then took another role a couple of years later back into agency. And part of the remit was, hey, let's implement this model again. We've done it before, we can do it again. And the wheels, it went spectacularly wrong. Nothing went according to plan. I think the big thing I learned, and the type of things that went wrong in that move were, every plan and every situation is built for. Well, everything is really built for one situation that you're going through at the time. And when we took that model, and when I took that model into the next agency, I always pay attention to people. I think people and the processes, people rules above process. And I've always been a fan of that, culture eats strategy for breakfast statement. But I think it really hit home when, if you're not bringing the people with you in an agency, client side, or broader organizational scenarios, things can't always go right. So I think, in terms of my personal story, it's a real simple, quick one in that sense, but it's really about, sometimes that degree of fearlessness. I think it helped me in the first time that we built this model for change. And the more experienced people step back going, it can't be done, and we pulled it off. But pulling it off once doesn't mean you can pull it off 2 or 3 times. You can't always cookie cut a process in our industry, because our industry is moving so fast. Now, I'm a huge fan of putting up the MarTech landscape and saying, how can one person manage this? And I think the penny really dropped for me when I sat down in London. We have Charlotte Street, and I sat down at one of the cafes, and I sat with one of the people I know, one of the mentors I work with in the industry, and he said, "But do you really think you alone could change it?" And I thought, that's really it. When Gemma asked about this, she said, what's your biggest leadership failure? And I think the naivety of authentic leadership and leadership generally is that it takes one person. I work for a multinational out of Asia now, Huawei Technologies, and the biggest lesson I've learned over the last few months is, I had a notional idea about matrix-driven organizations, but to truly work in a matrix organization where people below you have as much say, people above you have a certain amount of say, people alongside you, this is collaboration, this is teamwork, it's true partnership in a sense, and I think that today more than ever is required for success. So leadership needs to be and successful leadership needs to be cognizant of this. And I think that, I experienced that firsthand going into the agency, trying to implement and override a situation. I think those ways of managing and leading are finished. That's my quick story. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I think you've answered most of my questions I was going to ask you there. Thank you so much. Sarah, your time first.
I'm going to talk about it from the point of view of setting big, hairy, audacious goals and going for it. Because I think that's really, really important in this world. I think if you set yourself, so sort of soft targets, actually you're probably more in danger of failing than you are if you set yourself sort of like, high targets, in terms of really addressing that and really going for it. And the particular instance I'll talk about is I was at Barclays before I came to Unilever. And I was responsible for launching, well, it's called contactless payment, but you probably know it's tap to pay. Which is, commonplace now. So every debit card, credit card, in the UK anyway, has tap to pay functionality. That wasn't the case 7 years ago. We were the first bank to bring it to the UK. And with that came, some very, very hairy, ambitious goals that we set ourselves in terms of what we needed to achieve. And, the reality was they were probably, they were unachievable. But the fact that you set yourselves, those very, very sort of like hard goals meant you were more likely to get nearer to it than you were if you set yourself a softer goal. And that wasn't, a number of different barriers that actually we had to overcome in the process of that, around the understanding of how you tap to pay, what consumers needed to do in terms of the education piece. And also, we need to get the terminals into retailers as well, because you need a different terminal in order to be able to tap your card on the terminal in order to be able to pay. So there were a number of different sort of like sides to this. And the reality is, we didn't achieve those targets and we didn't come anywhere near achieving those targets. But actually, we learned a lot in terms of just bringing it to market, in terms of, what we need to do to get closer to those targets in future. So I think that's my kind of story and my learning from that.
Thank you. Get your questions ready, because I'll come out to the audience in a second. But for now, I'm going to start with you, Paul. You talk about something where, I suppose quite early on in your career, there were some big, big learnings for you. I guess, what advice would you give to others to go for it within an so even though it wasn't right what you did, you potentially, it actually worked really well for you.
I think that was the learning, and actually, because I had a bit of a thought with this as I was, when you first asked us to tell the story, was should I tell one from now, or should I tell the reason why I learned it in the first place? And that's why I told that first one, is not because it's far away and it feels like I can talk about, this time I failed, but actually I've been amazing since. So that's not the learning. The learning was actually very real and very close to me that day, and I kept it with me for my entire career, which was, you don't have to fail, actually completely mess things up in order to learn anything or in order to propel yourself forward. You just have to not be scared to face the things you're not good at. And in every appraisal, in every given situation, in every project or any sort of professional situation that I found myself in, I was always very, very, very distinct in wanting to know the things that either I, my team, or the wider environment hadn't done well. So every single time I'm in a review, even now, I want to know the things that I'm failing at. I want to know the things that I've not gained and I've not done brilliantly, because it's only by really driving into the things that I'm not great at, or that the team hasn't solved, or that the project is going to fail at if it doesn't set itself these great goals. It's by driving into those problems that the next time you look at it and the next time you review it, you've improved. Otherwise, if you focus on the positives and if you focus on the things that you're already good at, you never have a chance to optimize. You just sort of repeat what you've done before, and that will never drive you forward.
So how can you create that culture within your organisation? So we talk a lot about, permission to fail. We talk about taking risks, but the reality is a lot of corporates are not built for that. I'm going to come to Nick. So how do you create an environment where it's okay to fail, it's okay to take those risks?
In short, that's not easy.
No.
I think there's a lot of, I think commercially there's a lot of pressure on, so the two worlds, well, three worlds I'm most familiar with across our industry. So the agency world, the media owner world, and then the client side world. And I think failure is appreciated differently across those three spectrums, well, across those three units. We can learn a lot from technology, media startups, where often if you're a funded company, there's a degree of license in terms of failure, because there's a general acceptance that you need to move fast. So you've got to be trying, you've got to be innovating, and not everything's going to work. So, and some of that comes from this idea of it's a Silicon Valley origin in terms of idea. Then you have from my experience, you have the British-led agency, which is a highly commercial entity. It's got to prove its worth. They're really well managed as a business entity in terms of profit and loss, which has the degrees of freedom are far less than any technology startup. Everything is just run very tightly. Then you have this organizational entity called if you like client side, and the example which I would look at is companies that I'm most working alongside at the moment, companies out of the East. How does one accept failure? How does one accept attempting to do things that don't quite work? Well, I think the risk aversion is probably far greater out there. Things are very, very considered. There's an appreciation for long-term planning, which seems to have been lost in certain international markets. Certain international markets we all know suffer from short-termism. You meet your quarterly targets, you meet your yearly targets, whereas the world that I'm working closer to at the moment is more appreciative of long-range planning, something that seems to have been forgotten. And I think within that long-range planning is something that allows one to operate more cautiously, but also accounts for a degree of risk and failure. So I think it's wrapped in a very different context. I'm addressing it from a pretty high level, but I think the risk and failure within a long-range project, it feels like it's something we could learn from more in the international markets.
So one of the things I've learned is since admitting it's okay to be fallible, we end up having much better, bigger conversations where together we can do some really good stuff. Do you think, Sarah, it's okay to be vulnerable? Do you agree with that?
Oh,
in
yes.
the workplace?
I mean, it's key, and I think when you say, well, how do you encourage more risk-taking? It's managed risk-taking, but it's about walking the talk, and I think in leading by example that is really key, and also creating the right comfort zone for people to be able to operate within. And I think when you do that, then you end up with a situation where people take managed risks, and that's what it's about. And then you achieve far more by doing that.
Excellent. Have we got any questions out there? Oh my goodness, no questions. No questions for our three amazing. Oh, we've got one over here. There's a microphone somewhere. If you just wait for Steve. There we go. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Embracing failure, facing your fears in a working situation, it's a characteristic, it's a very personal thing. And a lot of that is about knowing yourself and being that individual and being true to yourself. And I wonder what the panel thinks about the industry's ability to help people be themselves and be true to themselves as opposed to becoming characterized in what they appear to need to be to conform to the way that everything else gets done.
Great question. Who would you like to put that to first?
Why don't we start with you, Gemma?
No, I'm the moderator. But fair enough. So for me, everything that we're doing is about being yourself, and it's when you can bring your true self. And I agree with what Michelle said entirely. When you can bring your true self to something, really understand what your values are and what your purpose is, you can have a much bigger impact. And I think as an industry and companies, we don't allow ourselves to be ourselves. I was judging some awards the other day, and the young person said, who was brilliant, who won, he said, I really feel like I can be myself right now, but I don't feel like I can be myself in my company. And it's because the culture and the environment doesn't allow you to. So I think we have to cut through from that. I think it's all about being ourselves, being authentic, and that's when you can have the biggest impacts. I'm going to go to you, because I'm not meant to be asking questions, but hopefully that answered that.
I think it's a really, really great question. I don't know the answer, but I think the answer might lie somewhere in your approach to criticism, which is a cultural thing, which is I'm immensely self-critical. I think I've always needed to be, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm my own harshest judge. But I don't think you should be everyone else's harshest judge. And I think at Burberry now, one of the things that is incredible at the place, which is everyone's bright, everyone's capable, everyone wants the best. Everyone is self-critical and wonders whether or not they've done the right thing, but they would never ever cut anyone else down for their own ideas or for their own suggestions. It's a very encouraging, almost the people used to talk about in the music industry having like a hits business where for every one single hit you'd have 9 sort of complete crazy sort of misses and failures, and that was okay, rather than sort of going, oh, you failed. It would be, don't worry, you're only expected to get one hit. And I think that hopefully, whilst we're not quite like the music business at Burberry, what's really noticeable is how empowering, and it's a big word, I know, but just sort of quietly sort of encouraging all of the criticism is in the building. And the only time it's ever brutal is on yourself. And so therefore, I think criticism and failure and analytics of failure starts at home and in yourself before you should ever make anyone else feel frightened.
So how do you think you can create an environment where that works?
Talk about your own failure before you talk about anyone else's, I think, publicly. Yeah. Like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Very publicly. Sarah, would you agree?
So I think, Unilever talks a lot about authentic leadership and purpose-driven leadership. And it is about, sometimes feeling vulnerable, but bringing your real self to work. Because if you don't, people see through you very quickly. Yes. And, it's about understanding your true north and really what gets you up in the morning, what do you want to achieve in life, and marrying that work-life balance in terms of making sure that actually, fundamentally, you're getting as much out of it as the business is. So, and when you do that, and when you match those two together, that's when you really find a sweet spot. And that's when you bring people with you. That's when you come alive. That's when you inspire and you motivate people. It's just, it's a really good match, and it's the only way to conduct business these days.
Thank you. Would you
I guess my 2 pence, trust Steve to ask a hard question. So know yourself. This is a really deep question.
Yourself,
and I think there's 2 comments that I'll layer on. So and I'm going to be a bit harsh on this. I think we're coming to the end of this authentic leadership label. I think it's done its rounds. I think it's I've been in that for a very long time in terms of studying it. I think it's a great topic. It's a great label for a certain era. But I think what it misses things. And what sort of things does it miss? In terms of authentic leadership, we don't talk enough about the experiences that make up a person in order to deliver an authentic self. So I think this was demonstrated spectacularly with, in the UK we have Brexit, and why did our communications get it so wrong? And it turns out the commentators were pointing out that we exist as an industry within this bubble, the M25, and we hadn't really engaged outside of the self, right? So what I'm setting up is this dialectic, at least, between knowing oneself, but what is in the self? Did you put enough in? And I think this is what's omitted in a lot of the conversation about authentic leadership. Knowing one's values is really crucial. One has to do that. But it's also, are we feeding our experiences enough to deliver, to put something out that is rich and engaging? So are we making, in the MarTech world, if you like, are we making enough of an effort to engage with the industry out there in order to deliver something back that's rich? And then how did you own that? How did you make that into and learn from that? I think that's really key. And then I think secondly, something that we don't have enough of is time to reflect on this. So often we're running around chasing our tails in high pressure industries to deliver commercially. industries are being disrupted. So two big things are weighing in, I think, on this ability to deliver what is, authentic leadership. So it's time to reflect, and secondly, are we putting enough in? And those are things that I think we tend to miss in the conversation around authentic. So I'm not, it's okay, but it needs to be balanced out with, these other things that are going on that I think we don't talk enough about.
Yeah. Would you like to build on that too?
No, I think I'm good.
No, you think you're good. Excellent. Any? There we've got a lovely lady at the front. Go.
I'd be interested in understanding how you've influenced a culture change within your companies in the sense of inviting that level of authenticity at whatever scale, from a leadership level or an individual contributor level, and at the same time, what platforms do you use? So when you would like to have or develop that sense of, communication, so getting folks or colleagues to be more communicative about their failures and so forth, what platforms have you used in order to invite that level of discussion?
Great question. I'm going to start with you on that one.
Firstly, I'm not sure, I don't know if anyone else has, if they have, then well done, but changing an entire company's culture is quite difficult, so I'm not sure I would ever claim that I've done that at any of the companies that I've worked with. But how have I sorted it out, being more authentic and sort of dealing with failure in Burberry is actually the biggest platform is every single meeting, every single day. I know it's a real cop-out in a sense, but we don't do these big platforms, these big meetings, these big presentations. What we do is make sure that we agree to have more open, more flexible, less hierarchical conversations in every single meeting every day, whether it's okay to have a point of view, it's okay to have a failure or any sort of other sort of not perfectly formed thought in front of senior people, and the senior people have to engender that every single day.
I think to build on that, I think one has to be realistic about how big a change do you want to introduce. So doing small incremental change is something that is manageable, whereas a big change, to use the term a transformation project, very different moments. But I tend to agree with Paul on this one. It's every engagement. It could be a one-to-one engagement with a colleague. It could be the running of a workshop. It could be a number of things. But I think it's how much change are you wanting to introduce? So if it's a workshop, are you taking the team too far? Are you trying to achieve too much? How are we going to break this thing up? So there's that degree of planning and being realistic about the time scale. I think that's crucial. And often, I come back to it, those pressures from the outside, are driving the pace of change. So we and the leadership moment is often sometimes a question of pushing back and saying, look, we need to get there, but we might not be able to within this context.
I think it's about, I'm going to put a slightly different spin on it. I think it's about being innovative and being pioneering and very much encouraging the pioneering spirit. And with that, I think you have to accept that some things will work, some things will fail. And that's the environment of which we like to create as a pioneering experience that gives people the space in order to be able to take those managed risks and be able to learn from that. And it's all about learning experience. I think as long as you learn from what you've done, and maybe it didn't go as well, but what could you do better next time around? And that's what, just pushing the boundaries all the time, through kind of, think of it through that sort of lens, I think is a more positive way of looking at it than, going to a session and saying, have a therapy session and saying, let's share our failures, So I think it's kind of, it goes back to creating the right environment and kind of having a real comfort zone for people to be able to take those risks.
So building on the comfort zone, we talk about getting out of our comfort zone, and for us it's, when we talk about brave things, it's doing the little things every day that move you out your comfort zone. And I look to Michelle again, my new god, about this. But how do you encourage people to get out of their comfort zone? Because you talk about meetings, and Paul, you talked about, every single meeting, every single interaction. How do you encourage people to be able to be uncomfortable, to be able to say the things that other people wouldn't say, which creates the truth and the honesty and the openness? Is that a
Another
really hard
massive
question?
question. Actually, do you know what? By not making every meeting feel uncomfortable, it's weird, it's counterintuitive. I think that I'm pretty sure that the way that Michelle faced all her fears was not for them to still feel fearful whilst doing them. It was just to create an environment where they were possible, create an environment where everything was encouraged, and create an environment where it didn't feel uncomfortable doing it. It felt actually more uncomfortable to not do it. I think you have to start sort of working on people's fears and make those cultural sort of worries work against hiding things and work against stopping yourself doing things, and actually start to encourage people to try and to do more, I think.
Excellent. And on that note, I've just seen that there's a flashing time up. It's always one of those big conversations that was going to be difficult to do in half an hour. But thank you all so much for your bravery, because it is brave to get up here. First of all, after Michelle, and secondly, admitting when adversity, because it's through adversity that we can really create success. So thank you very much, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you to all of our speakers.
Thank you very much. Wow, what a session, guys. Open up the whole day being brave and bold. Thank you very much. We did offer that session to a few more people, but you can imagine the take-up wasn't high. So a big round of applause for being so brave. Thank you.